There's a quote that goes, idleness is the devil's playground. Idleness is the devil's workshop. And there's a little bit of truth to that. And let me just kind of explain that to you on the basis of our first reading. Now, we only hear a nugget of the first reading of today. To understand it, we have to expand and we have to hear the whole story. But if you actually read the story of David today that leads up to the first reading, it actually begins like this. At the time of the year, when the kings used to go out to battle. And when we think about it, at the time of the year, you may ask, well, what time of the year is it? The answer is, of course, springtime. Okay? Winter is the worst time to engage in battle. Let me give you an example of that. I like to read the history, everyone, of World War II, and it's fascinating kind of how the history goes, especially how it worked at the beginning. Actually, before World War II broke out, Germany and Russia signed a non-aggression pact. In other words, Germany agreed not to invade Russia. Russia agreed not to invade Germany. And when that was signed in 1939, on September 1st of 1939, Germany invaded Poland. And that officially began World War II. But if you don't remember, everyone, your history, another country also invaded Poland in September of 1939. And do you remember which one it was? It was actually Russia. As Germany invaded Poland, Russia also invaded Poland in September of 1939. Okay, it's amazing how this all unfolds. And this non-aggression pact, everyone, was sustained until, of all things, Germany invaded Russia June 1st of 1941. And when you read that story, everyone, the German war machine just ate up miles upon miles of Russian territory until finally two things happened. One, Germany became overextended. When you look at Russia, you realize just how massive Russia is. And to keep clicking across territory, what do you need? You need men, you need munitions, and you need fuel. They became overextended. The second thing that brought Germany to a halt, everyone, was, of course, Old Man Winter. And when you read the story, everyone, of the winter of 41 and 42, it was awful. Cold, snow, and wind. It brought the German war machine to a complete stop 30 miles from Moscow. And really, everyone, with that stoppage, it gave time for Russia to mount a counteroffensive and slowly began the German retreat back to Germany. And I share that with you, everyone, because it does remind us of what I said earlier. At the time of the year, the kings engaged in battle. It makes sense that the time of year be spring. Think about, we live in Minnesota. If you came up to me and said, Father, we're going to invade somebody on December 1st, well, we know better. We know what's before us. So what are we going to do? We're going to plan it when it's going to most likely best work. So it's the spring. Okay? But we have a problem here. Because it goes at the time of the year when the kings used to go to battle, spring. When the kings used to go to battle. But when you read the story, you realize that David doesn't go to battle. As a matter of fact, everyone, he stays home. And not only does he stay home, you know what else he does? When you read the story, he takes a nap. He takes a siesta. Now think about that, everyone, that strange twist. Other kings are battling, his own men are battling, and what does he do? He takes a nap. And he gets up from his nap, he goes to the roof of the palace, he looks out, and what does he see? Oh my, there's Bathsheba. I want her. And he gets her. Comes over, has relations, and what happens? She becomes pregnant. Now David is smart. David knows the Mosaic law. The law of Moses says anybody, even a king, who commits adultery should be sentenced to death. He's got a problem. And so he realizes, I got to think fast. So what does he do? Bathsheba is here. Uriah is on the battlegrounds. He calls Uriah home and says, you lay with your wife. sleep with your wife. And Uriah said, I won't do it. We're in battle. That's where I'm to be. So you know what David does in the end? And this is the great, strange twist of the whole story. In the end, Uriah carries his own death sentence. What do I mean? Let me explain that. When he realizes that Uriah is not going to sleep with Bathsheba, David gets out a pen and he writes. And he writes to the great army commander Joab, and he says this, I want you to take Uriah with a group of men into the strongest fight. And in the midst of the battle, your men retreat, but leave Uriah where he is, so that Uriah can be killed. Isn't that terrible? But that's what he pens. And he sends it off to Joab. And you know something? When you read the story, guess who carries the letter to Joab? It is Uriah. So when I say he carried off his death sentence, literally, he did. Took it from David, gave it to Joab, and it meant his death. Now, in the eyes of Uriah, David was saved, but not in the eyes of God. That's today's first reading. God is angry. And through the mouth of Nathan, he says, it is time for you to die, David. But he doesn't die. And you wonder, why? I want you to remember these 6 words, because we will come back to them repeatedly in this homily. David says 6 words. I have sinned against the Lord. And that's all God needs to hear. He realizes here's a man with a contrite heart, sorrowful heart, and so in the end he doesn't set out and kill David. I have sinned against the Lord. Adultery, sin number 1. Let's look at the sin of the gospel. This is finger pointing. Okay? You know it. Point a finger at David. Finger pointing. Okay? Now, here's what happens, everyone, in the gospel. Simon invites Jesus to dine with him. This woman comes in, falls down, anoints Jesus' feet with oil, wipes him with her hair as she cries upon his feet. Kind of a strange story today. But here's actually what happens as the story unfolds. Simon thinks to himself, man, if this man were who he says he is, he would know this woman is that she's a sinner. So in other words, Simon does this, points a finger. Says, if you are who you claim you are, you would know this woman is a sinner. Okay? Finger pointing. But do you remember, everyone, in finger pointing, when I point a finger at someone, how many are pointed back? 3. 3. Jesus is a genius. He says, okay, Simon, if that's what you have to say, let me share this with you. He has rebukes. You count how many there are. I came to your home and gave you no water for my feet, and you gave me no water for my feet. She has washed my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, yet she has not ceased kissing my feet. You didn't anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet. How many are there? There's no water, no kiss, no oil. Count them. 1, 2, 3. Jesus is a genius. Simon points a finger and says, okay, I'll shoot back. How many does he shoot back? 1, 2, 3. Game, set, match. Now, people, we learn 2 things about seeking forgiveness today. Number 1, you can do it by word. David does that. And what are the 6 words that he says? I have sinned against the Lord. But we realize the woman, and this is interesting, you pick up your Bible, you read this story today, and you know something, you're going to realize the woman today says not a word. There's no quoted word of this woman. So embarrassed is she by her sin that she says, I can't even speak. So what does she do? She gets down on her knees, she anoints, she kisses, she bathes, she wipes. And in both cases, what did God do? He forgives. People, I want to tell you something today about finger pointing. You know something? If anyone dares points a finger at someone in this church, 3 fingers should be aimed back at us. There is no one in this church who can point at someone and say, you're a sinner, without the same finger being pointed back at us. No one. And because of that, what does God seek? 6 simple words. I have sinned against the Lord. A contrite heart, a sorrowful heart. I preach this homily today, everyone, because this is the year of mercy. And what is it that God seeks? Contrite hearts, sorrowful hearts. Words that truly say, I've sinned against the Lord. So let's keep that before us, everyone, and let us seek once again the mercy and the forgiveness of Jesus Christ.